game-changing discussions on the big ideas that shape our thinking. This is One-to-One.
My guest today is an investment professional and agribusiness leader whose career spans equities research in London, infrastructure financing in Lagos, the turnaround of listed companies in Nigeria, as well as private equity investments exceeding $2 billion in aggregate mandates. He's the managing director and chief executive officer of Ellah Lakes PLC, where he's leading a sweeping transformation, repositioning the company from its origins in fish farming into a modern agroindustrial enterprise. Chuka Mordi, welcome to One-to-One.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. So Chuka, you haven't moved back to Nigeria. You co-founded CBO Capital with a good friend of yours. And through that, you executed more than 50 mandates with over $2 billion in aggregate value, I believe. I'd like to know what the scale of that engagement taught you about the Nigerian business landscape. What was your education at the time? Its strengths, blind spots, and structural weaknesses?
I mean, there are a lot of things I would have done differently now, with hindsight. But Bex, my partner at the time, I met in London. He used to be a bond trader. Like I said, he's a large part of the reason I moved back. And we worked together for a bit at FCMB Capital Markets, the investment banking side of FCMB. And then we set up CBO Capital Partners in 2009. I think there's a big difference between growing up somewhere as a teenager and then working in terms of your understanding of the place. So I understood Nigeria as the place I grew up. So that's where I'm from. I understand Nigeria. But it's very different as a professional working environment, how people do things as adults. It's very different from how people do things when your parents buy your clothes or pay your school fees. Life is very different in terms of how you engage. But I learned a few things about how, there are things you don't think about if you have a very stable political economy. So business is dependent on the nature of the macro. Any macro environment is dependent on the politics and the policy. So if you have a political environment that is not particularly stable, it does disruptive things to the macro that affect business in a very real way. So if people make decisions that are very disruptive to your macroeconomy and your interest rates go sky high because of inflation and your exchange rate goes terrible, it's terrible because of bad economic decisions, it just affects everything. You can't scale businesses because they don't have the optimal economic environment to grow in. So you look at certain things and it doesn't matter what you do. Your advisory business is based on people trying to do deals and transactions. Deals and transactions are dependent on the economy growing. So there's a certain scale that's just not achievable if you don't have the economy going in a certain way. And these are the limitations of running an advisory business in a place like Nigeria. There are many externalities you're not in control of. I'm not sure it's good or bad, it's just what it is.
Yes. So would you say that perhaps you were prepared for those differences, or you were
not at all. I was not prepared at all.
So how did you cope? How did you make the transition in your mind, you and your partner? Because you did pretty well, obviously, at CBO Capital.
In the long term, yes. But I mean, you stumble when you pick yourself up and try to figure out what you didn't do properly in the context of where you are. And you start all over again.
Okay.
I think it's an iterative process, right? Just do that all over again.
So let's talk about Ellah Lakes, which is where you are now, and the amazing transformation story. Just for a bit of context, Ellah Lakes, of course, was incorporated in 1980, originally as a fish farming business. It underwent a major agribusiness transformation about when you got there took over CEO in 2019. And then you went on to acquire Teluria Limited and so on and so forth. But here's my question. When you took over as CEO of Ellah Lakes in 2019, many actually regarded it, or would have regarded it, as a distressed asset.
It was distressed.
It was. But what was the one thing you felt you realized needed to change since you took over?
I mean, we reversed into an insolvent business at the time, but it was listed on the stock exchange. It was a good vehicle for what we wanted to do. We could recapitalize it and use it as a fundraising entity to expand the business, which we were in already. So we reversed to do it into NLX PLC. Reverse acquisitions were big in Nigeria. It's probably the second after, I think, Ocean and Oil and Agribusiness. What year it was, 2004 or 5. So they're fairly commonplace on Wall Street or in the city.
So you had already gotten into the agri business, and you needed to turbocharge that, so you looked for a vehicle.
Could not have described it better. Essentially, yes, that was it. And so it was just getting a new team, building the team, then building the business.
Good. Okay. So what therefore was the logic behind moving from fish farming to diversified agroindustrial enterprise? Scale. Absolutely.
The ability to scale. Look at the Nigerian macro environment and think what could be really big here. Oil palm grows here, climatic conditions perfect, consumption not as properly serviced as it should be. We import a lot of the stuff, and sometimes you just look at the market and think this has potential for proper scale if you do it well. So livestock, pigs.
So that, of course, will expand your land bank and operational
biggest number 3 in Nigeria.
Quite significantly. Absolutely. What do you think that's going to unlock for your company, being in that sort of position?
I mean, so 2 things. Because we're listed, it's easier to raise financing. But I have 11,000 shareholders, so there's just more people to deal with. The upside of being private is there are a bunch of you in a room, you make a decision, and you just go with it. The downside is it's difficult to raise finance. The upside of being publicly listed like we are is you go to the markets, you raise money, but there's quarterly reporting, there's a lot of transparency, so there's less space to make mistakes and then try to correct them because everything's in preview of the public.
It's called institutionalization.
Yeah, exactly. So it can be problematic because there's some things that you just don't know. You need to figure out, and you don't want to figure out in full view of 11,000 people at an AGM asking you questions. And you can't say things like, we don't know yet, we're still trying to work through it. Which sometimes you need to do because no one knows all the answers.
But you'll be in third position, so that surely you're in striking distance.
You want to be first.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think comparatively, if you look at, Olam started in Nigeria. Olam's revenues last year were bigger than Nigeria's budget. So it makes sense that it is achievable.
Absolutely.
We eat a lot of food. We're 200 million people. We import a lot of the stuff we eat. So there's scope for a lot of growth.
Yes. So Chuka, talking about the potential scale of the business, and particularly as you're going through this acquisition at this point in time, how do you respond to people who are naturally skeptical about whether or not a listed agribusiness and truly scale and deliver profitability in Nigeria, especially given our current environment?
Well, one, there'll always be skeptics. I was one of the guys who saw LinkedIn and thought, back at work. When Facebook started, I thought, I won't make any money. So skepticism is a natural thing, I think. There's always someone who thinks it won't work. But I think if you just look at, we're not doing anything revolutionary or new. It's just going down a well-trodden path. So if you do things properly, then you'll be very successful. And we're in the environment where I think it's actually perfect. Well, not perfect, but very good. We consume a lot. We have a growing economy. So if you produce food properly, then you make money.
But of course, there are several others like you who are trying to do the same thing. So there is competition. So, and that is an essential part of that.
I was in an interview earlier, and I said, it's not competition. It's complementary,
right?
Because we're all working in a space which is so underserved.
Absolutely.
I mean, just specifically palm oil. If we doubled our production every year for the next 5 years, we would not be able to feed the Nigerian market and consumption. So it's an opportunity. Sure. So the key is to get it, to do it properly. And if you do it properly, then it should work. But, the crazy externalities, things could happen. There could be a military coup, there could be an earthquake, but those are not material to what I'm doing right now. It's simply just try and do the job properly. And
all right. So let's. I mean, if we set aside for a second the prospect of military coups and
it was far-fetched things you can imagine, but outside the scope of normal activity, you just want to do the job properly. Plant, harvest, have proper agronomists, and run an operation effectively. And if you do that properly, then things should work out. Of course, there are external things that can affect you, but if you think about that, you never do your work.
Yeah. So let's talk about investment and raising capital. I'm interested in how you, in your position in your industry, how you think about capital, patient capital, equity versus debt. When you're building a long-term agroindustrial business, how are you viewing that capital?
I mean, I guess we have to get a bit technical here. You want to do equity, right? In the current credit environment, interest rates are 25% on any kind of debt. So if you're borrowing money, you have to make margins of 25% or more in order to pay the money back and then have some left as a profit. I mean, in the most basic way, right? So if you're not in a business that's making that sort of margin, then borrowing money makes no sense because you have to pay it back.
Sure.
If you don't make enough to pay it back, you're insolvent. You've wasted everybody's time and money. So almost necessarily you have to look at a different type of financing, maybe mezz financing, convertibles that debt turns into equity under certain conditions. But generally you want equity financing. Is that always great? Not necessarily. If you invest in something and inflation is 20% a year, then you have to make returns above inflation or you're actually losing money in real terms. So there's a lot of, I don't want to say complexity around financing, but you have to understand what you're doing with the capital structure of a company, or even if you run the company well, the nature of the financing you have could cause problems.
But then again, we are still talking about food security here. Are there other sources or forms of finance open to you? DFI money, for example, is that a reality in your existence?
Well, there's different types of DFI, right?
Yes.
The CBN, Central Bank of Nigeria, has a DFI mandate, which they're rolling back right now because it was suboptimal in the way it was employed. So we got some DFI financing, a tiny bit, but interest rates are 20. The central bank loans you money at 5. In real terms, they're subsidizing you by 15%, but that's government policy. So it goes back to what I said earlier about some government policy, depending on how it's applied, can be good or bad. That's potentially very good policy. But of course, if you divert 15% to someone else who is not farming, you're not serving the sectors. So misuse is very different from whether it's good policy or not.
So the fact is that provision is there. And I suppose the core of my question is, are you seeing enough of that in what really is a crucial sector?
I don't want to make a judgment of the Nigerian agri sector, but truth is no, of course not. We're not seeing enough of anything, which is why growth is 2 point something percent. But that's potentially a political question, because I think the economics and the macro is driven by the nature of the politics and what politicians do, because they run a country. But the answer to the question is a simple no. Of course not. Why not?
You're not. Okay. So Nigeria imports billions of dollars worth of food annually. So from your vantage point, what are the most urgent reforms needed to unlock real agricultural productivity? We've alluded to some of it already, perhaps. I'm asking you to zero in and talk to me about some of those crucial reforms that are needed.
That's a big question. And I think it's difficult to limit it to just agricultural productivity or food security, because it's an economic thing and it's related to a variety of things. So education. So you need to invest in people who can do things well, properly. And that's about investing in education. So you have to fix the educational sector. Now, how do you fix the educational sector? Do you throw a lot of money at it? Do you subsidize it with government policy? Or do you say, hey, look, just open to everybody, private sector, public sector? Because don't forget, all the universities in Nigeria were government, publicly funded universities until they started giving licenses to people to say, open your own private university. But university education is very, very subsidized in Nigeria.
It is.
So should you make it a free-for-all and say, take away the subsidies and let people pay what it's actually worth? That way you encourage people to go into academia who know what they're doing because they can get paid properly. I mean, I think my driver's salary is probably the same as a professor in Nigerian university. Makes no sense. So that's why I said, if you wanted to fix education, there are a variety of things in the educational space that you need to consider. But that leads into the question of how do you fix the agribusiness sector or fix other sectors, is by having competent people in those spaces. Competence means being educated properly. So they're all linked, I think. So it's critical that a lot of stuff cannot be fixed by the private sector. It's public policy intervention done properly.
And since we're talking about, and that is the very crux of the question, we're talking about public policy and reform coming from there. So, I mean, I'll ask the question again. So what do you believe to be the most urgent reforms needed by the sector to move things along?
Again, I don't think there's most urgent. There are a variety of things.
Talk to me.
Tariffs or no tariffs. Tariffs make sense if you're trying to protect local industries that can scale very quickly, so you have local employment. But tariffs make no sense if you don't do it well. You're just making it more expensive for the local consumer. So it makes no sense. But you'll have people in the Senate saying, no, we should not pay X, but that's the commercial price for X. It's supply and demand. You can't disconnect payment for something from the inputs and what makes it that price. So it's a lot of understanding, right? You need people who understand how to make policy.
Yes.
And that's a difficult one. So there are many things. So I started with tariffs, but the nature of tariffs in Nigeria is dictated by the federal government. And so from time to time, how they engage with the Senate. Nigeria's vertical Congress.
So clearly it's not acceptable that we import billions of dollars worth of food.
The question is why.
The question is why. Precisely.
So we had a fantastic textile industry that was bankrupted by cheap imports. Should we have set up tariffs then to protect it? If we had, would we have kept the jobs long term? Would they have survived in some economically viable way? I mean, you have to make a decision, right?
Yes.
But it's making the right decision. That is important.
So on the subject of tariffs, what decision would you make should you have the opportunity?
Depends on the sector. Depends
Agribusiness.
on
Agriculture.
Depends on rice.
Okay.
If we don't produce enough rice to feed ourselves, so we have to import rice. But where do you set the tariff where it's not flooding the market with lots of cheap imports that bankrupts all the local rice farmers? it requires a lot of research, understanding of the local market. What could you do to increase farmer education, to increase yields locally, so become self-sufficient in rice? Do we necessarily want to be self-sufficient in growing certain things? Probably not, if they can be made cheaper by other people and we focus on doing things that we do properly and more efficiently. We can't be all things to all men, and we can't do everything. Everybody has to import some things because it's just done better by other people or done cheaper by other people.
So, Chuka, in your business, of course, there are certain things that are very difficult to ignore. And you can tell me whether or not you feel that this has a direct impact on your business today or potentially in the future. Climate change, for example. You're in the agribusiness. Talk to me about how that is affecting your business or what you see in times to come.
Changing seasons, changing climatic conditions. Obviously, it's had an effect on the nature of planning and how one executes certain things. And you need subject matter experts to do proper analysis and guide you on how to deal with these things. So in a very specific way, it affects planting, harvesting, and you have to yield everything. It just means you have to have more people who understand it, subject matter experts who understand modern agronomy and how to mitigate these things to the degree that they can be mitigated. So it's just a problem that we have to deal with.
Would you say it's a big problem you have to deal with in Nigeria, in your business today?
In my business today, at the present time, it's problematic, but not a massive problem the way it is in, say, northern Nigeria, where desert encroachment is a real problem. I was in Abuja last week discussing with a friend who the Argungu Fishing Festival came up, and the wetlands in Kebbi State and Sokoto had been disappearing over the last 50 years. So there are people who remember phenomena that no longer exist, or places where there were trees and crocodiles in Kebbi State and Sokoto State that desert encroachment has just wiped out. So it's more problematic in many places than it is for us. We're battling with lower rainfall or different rainfall patterns, which difficult, but not so bad. So a lot of stuff is relative.
Right. And to what extent do you feel that the measure or the degree to which it's affecting your business is perhaps commensurate with the degree to which you are in direct touch with smallholder farmers?
I mean, smallholder or industrial scale, we all have these same problems. The mitigants for them are a bit more difficult, because if you need more fertilizer because X has happened with the soil, smallholder farmers can't afford fertilizer. So yeah, some of the problems are easier for us to deal with, but they are largely the same problems.
Sure. Right. So how about AI? To what extent is that playing a role in your industry, in your business?
No idea. Don't understand it. Technology, yeah. So now you can do soil analysis with satellites.
Sure.
So employing technology has been a lot more efficient. There's just so much stuff that can be done faster, that can be done more efficiently. But when it comes to AI, there's AI-enabled stuff as opposed to utilizing AI directly. I mean, we don't utilize AI directly in any way, but I'm certain that you get satellite imagery that does soil analysis. It's probably driven by some kind of AI, which, so that feeds into our business. But directly right now, not yet.
Does technology play enough of a part in
We'll play a bigger part going forward.
What you're doing now?
We'll play a bigger part in just soil analysis, genetics, understanding the nature of what you're growing, what you're planting, how to do things faster, getting higher yielding seedlings, things like that. I mean, it's about genetic modification. And I do not imagine, I can't see how AI will not play a larger part. It's just the growth of knowledge, right? And if it's concentrated knowledge in one form or another, it's just going to overtake whatever the contemporary knowledge base is.
And do you think that is likely to constitute a significant part of the plan that propels you from number 3 to number 1?
That's not a prediction I can make, because I can't say I fully understand the trajectory of AI.
Technology.
Yeah, technology, yeah. Technology, yes. AI, I don't know. But technology, without question, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
Well, we're seeing that you are in agribusiness. Talk to me, therefore, about the macroeconomic landscape that's in amongst and governance what you are doing. We know it's not optimal. Okay, but where would you like to see things to enable businesses like yours move forward?
It boils down to many things, not just farmer education, not just good policies, farmer herder challenges, religious issues, the nature of the political economy of northern Nigeria versus southern Nigeria. I think there are just very many complex issues around that I think it's unfair to reduce it to, of course, simplistic things.
How is any of that affecting your business?
Farmer herder thing was a big problem for us in the first few years. Still is. I mean, you just find different ways of engaging in dialogue and managing it. You could take the binary, this is my land, get off. If they don't, what are you going to do? Are you going to call the police, or are you going to engage if the police don't help? So it gets complex. There are power structures that support a variety of different interests.
So it was a problem for you. In what way, and how did you go about dealing with it?
I mean, if 1,000 cows invade your land and destroy your seedlings, then you have a problem. It's economically very damaging.
Yeah.
But do you try and fight them, or do you try and sit down and have a powwow? And sometimes there's what is wrong and what is right is different from what is the sensible thing to do at the time.
Yeah. But it's had a direct impact on your business, as you say. So in what way, and how did you navigate that?
Negotiation. You cannot dictate government policy. And if the government says we're doing X, whether it works for you or not, you just have to figure out how to work with it. Ranching versus no ranching. Does that help me or not help me? But in practice, can you enforce it is a different matter. If people have a certain way of life and they're nomadic, you can't do anything about it. Or maybe you can. That's the policy. Yeah. And in the private sector.
Of course. Chuka Mordi, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
On One-to-One.
Cheers, thanks.
Thank you.